that will lift it up to the school property, which, you know, the one of the benefits of Wolcott is that it's, you know, elevationally relatively flat, so we don't have a lot of what we call head to overcome with our pumps.
Okay, so 4 inches gets it to the town forest parking lot.
Yep.
And then the pipe that goes up the hill to the school, same size?
We actually haven't sized that yet, but certainly not any bigger.
Okay.
Probably the same size, yeah.
Okay, and that's, will that provide for growth? I mean, what are your usage projections? Like current town population, current usage, and then buffer or whatever your expectations for future size or future usage?
Yeah, good question. And we at some point in one of the other presentations, we can probably sort of put some more numbers to that, but in general, I think I don't know if Amy remembers any details, but I would.
So right now, the flow that we know that the disposal system can handle, and really with a soil-based wastewater system where your final polishing and treatment is happening in the soil, that's the limiter. So what the soil and the site can safely manage kind of governs what capacity is possible. In this case, we've done enough testing to know that that capacity is at least on the order of 20 to 25,000 gallons a day, which is enough to serve the present uses in the village and what we're calling the project area, and provides a little bit of bandwidth for future expansion or adaptive changes to properties that increase what wastewater flow they might need. So there is some immediate future capacity. And the other thing that is helpful, both problematic and helpful with how we have to figure out what the flows are, is the method that we have to use is pretty prescriptive and kind of overestimates what an existing like single family home or general store or town office with multiple employees might need for wastewater on a daily basis. So down the road, if this actually is constructed, what you'll find as people start to actually use it and you're monitoring the flow coming in as a condition of the permit, because that's what the indirect discharge rules require, is that you probably have more capacity in the system than what you thought you had. So down the road, there's an opportunity to continue to have that adaptive capacity to change uses and increase flows if you need to, beyond what you thought you had right when the system was commissioned.
Can I just add to Gordon's point?
Mhm.
We also have the option, we are designing also, or having ready a pre-treatment system, which is not going to be installed, not going to be constructed at the onset, but can be easily added later. But we would have to, if we need more capacity, if we want a brewery in town that's going to use a lot more than we have the potential to add on a pre-treatment later. We'd have to apply for additional funding and implement that, but that's not part of this, but we're designing that into the system. So it's there if we need it.
My understanding is we will permit for it. Is that true?
That's
We'll
right.
permit for it, so we'll be ready.
Yep.
But that extra cost, the select board decided when they get to choose the plan to go with the middle plan for now, see how it goes. If we need to add that additional treatment to it, we could add it on and it'll be all set.
Okay, so let me see if I got this. With the in-soil capacity at the school, we can surely cover everybody in town, everybody that we know about, plus more, based on numbers that you have to use, which are really high-end estimates.
Yep.
So do you know the little bit more, is it like 10% more? Is it 40% more? Kind of just round numbers, what kind of ballpark is it?
I think it's in the 10% range, right?
Okay, so basically, everybody we've got to then have to measure and find out if we can actually add another store. Apartments or something like that.
Depending on the size, I mean, so 10% of 20,000 is, say, 2,000 gallons a day. So when you have this many connections, a single family or a residential unit of any size is 245 gallons per unit. So that 2,000 gallons a day could be 10 units. It could be a pretty good sized general store with a few seats, maybe more than a few seats. There's kind of a Jenga there that depends on who's most interested first, which gets into wastewater ordinances and connections and all that, all those shenanigans. But you would have a decent amount of flexibility for incremental changes in a positive way.
We had a question on the back. I just didn't
Oh,
want.
yes, sorry.
Lose that.
Yeah, I was, well, it's already been answered, but the question for gallons per day, it's about 20,000.
There's, I will just chime in, there are quite a few nuances, that are still going to be worked out as we move forward with the design. One of those nuances is that the indirect discharge rules are currently, sort of being rewritten. But have not been adopted yet. And so some of the aspects of what my understanding of sort of in those draft indirect discharge rules could potentially help with our capacity a little bit. So I think if folks could hold out a little bit on those more specific numbers, we could try to fine tune them for you for our future presentations and information that we're trying to get out there. And I think the same will be sort of true of some of the costs that we're still trying to refine at this point. Our thought for this meeting was to really lay out the concepts, get everyone on the same page of what we're talking about. And some of those more fine-tuned details we can have in the coming months. That makes sense. Yep.
There's drip lines that are gonna be laid out on the ball field at the elementary school.
Yep.
How deep will they be buried?
They are very shallow. So the idea is that the place for the best treatment of wastewater is utilizing the soil sort of at the surface where there's a lot of oxygen transfer and a lot of those microorganisms that eat the wastewater are living. So
6 to 12 inches.
I was gonna say 6 to 12 inches below. But
Usually
think
12
about,
inches for
think
the-
about very small, kind of almost like irrigation piping. And very small doses of wastewater coming out of those spread out over time during the day. So it's not like a big gush of wastewater happening in any one place. So well below the surface where there's no chance of any contact.
How much pressure will be on those drip lines?
I don't know the answer, but in general, there's not a ton of pressure.
Enough to blow them
Mhm.
and on the surface.
And the orifices point down. So
And Rob, since this was sort of just laying out the project, we didn't ask to have Rob here, but he can kind of really get into the nitty gritty of some of those details for you. Okay.
I'm kicking myself. I have a little piece of drip line and it's sitting on my desk.
Oh, yeah.
Next time.
Yep.
Following up on that, Joe, but I'm on the school board, Gordon, and I took a field trip down to the Warren Elementary School where they have one of these systems installed. Because when we were talking about it, we were like, well, what? You know, we hear a lot of stories like some good, some bad. And there's a lot of memory and people went to school a little bit further west and they're saying that one of the sports fields had bad feel to it. So I wanted to kind of talk to someone who is operating a school that has a system supporting their town. So I went down to Warden talked to the principal, a couple of the city administrators. Some of the team, the wastewater committee came down. It was a great tour. It was a really cold, windy day. And the first question was, well, what kind of problems have you guys had? And they're like, what problems? And they're like, it's essentially invisible to the function of the school that had it. How many years have they been operating?
About almost 20.
Yeah, almost 20 years. And they have the collection tank right on the school property, so they have some venting there. And they're like, every once on like the hottest days, like they would get a little bit of odor that might drift across the fields far enough to get to the building and affect people, but those days were, he said, were notably rare. In this system, that part of the system would actually be further positioned away from the school. So the big thing is like, well, what's coming out of the pipe? Are the kids gonna have any exposure, public safety possibilities? The town administrators hadn't heard of any health concerns or complaints or anything that were related to the system and during their tenure. I'm just reporting what they told me. I obviously don't know firsthand. But the sense of it was that it's, when it's up and running and functioning correctly, which is by all, I think I had a war story from when it was first turned on. That was when the technology was 20 years new, and several hundred systems have been installed since then. So I think the technology has been dialed in. It's kind of older technology now. The sense is that, as long as the school follows the protocols, if they want to do any kind of development, like say in that area, that they work with the engineers who installed it so they don't trip the line by accident. The chances of public health issue for the kids is almost nil. And there were some other questions related to that too, in terms of, but they're going to do the penetration tests or whatever they do. They've got more testing to do with the school site to just make sure that the engineering is supported. But yeah, they need the school board to sign off to allow for additional testing so that they can prepare for the upcoming download. That's pretty much share that experience. It was actually reassuring to me personally, because my kids go to school, to hear that even being curious that the chances of them getting sick are pretty low.
I would just add that there are health problems with the existing system. There are sewer systems that are, leaching sewage into the river now. The river itself could use some help. So there are health problems with what we have already, which probably won't be fair to another system.
Well, I think this is a good segue into sort of this slide, which talks about how the system is going to be managed. And I think it's important first to note that because of the size of the system, which is greater than 6,500 gallons per day, as part of the indirect discharge permitting program at the state of Vermont. And that is it's a very robust permitting process, very detailed, and a lot of work that we'll be doing to prepare and hopefully obtain the permits from the indirect discharge program. Ashwak is on the line if there's any specific questions about her permitting process. So there's that. And then also along with that permit is very specific permit conditions on how the system needs to get managed. There needs to be a contract, an operator for the system who sort of will be overseeing and ensuring that it's functioning properly, and will include periodic inspections to make sure everything's working correctly. And then we'll also be available if there are alarms going off or other matters that need troubleshooting. So, and then also as part of that permit, there's, quite a lot of reporting, in terms of, flow monitoring and ensuring that we're within the amount of discharge. And then most importantly, there's sort of an annual inspection of the system by a professional engineer. as part of that annual inspection, we will be going to each of the properties, opening up the tanks, measuring the solids in each of the tanks, determining if those tanks need to be pumped that year or not, ensuring that the controls are working properly, and then also doing the same thing up at any interim pump stations on the town forest property and or the control building up at the school, just sort of confirming that everything's working and writing a detailed report of the findings. So it's a fair amount of oversight to ensure that that it's operating properly. So I guess I don't have too much else to say on that. I guess I will mention that the drip dispersal technology is very good at treating wastewater and very protective of groundwater and water quality, which is also very regulated within the indirect discharge rules. So you have good technology, and then you also have the safeguards behind it. So. Yep, and then one more slide, we can just talk about if there's a positive bond vote, kind of,
Yeah, when we have our positive.
As, if, as and when. We hope.
thank you, Tricia. Well, essentially, as it was mentioned earlier, that the system needs to be constructed by the end of 2026. So that's going to be a very aggressive timeline. As many of you may know, there are plans by V-Trans and the town to replace the Bridge Street School or the school. That, along with the acquisition of the town forest parcel, have been really great in sort of the timeframes aligning with this particular project. Largely because there will be a force main that will have to go across that bridge. And it'll be a whole lot easier to install the force main when a new bridge is getting built than trying to install it on the rickety old bridge. So anyway, back to the timeframe, that the entire system would need to be constructed by 2026 in order to meet the ARPA deadlines for that grant, which is sort of the largest funding source, as Tori will present later. So we're sort of shooting for some construction to be happening towards the end of 2025, hopefully. If not, we would be hoping to get ready and get an early start on the 2026 season, so it could be wrapped up that season. There is a whole lot of design work and permitting and things that need to happen in between. And so, you know, with the positive bond vote, we're going to really be hitting the ground running. Folks will be out here surveying the entire route and properties. And we'll be developing a full plan set and obviously engaging the community along the way. So that's sort of where we are. I will say there are sort of some milestones with the ARPA grants, and we'll obviously be focused on hitting all of those as we go. So I guess I'll pause again. There's still more slides by others, but if anyone has any additional questions on the engineering or the maintenance, feel free to shoot those out now.
Yep, I got a couple of questions.
Sure.
So we talked earlier about getting separation between our septic systems and our wells and community. Well, our community water and the school water are both on the premise of the school, just on the other corner of the building.
Yeah.
My limited knowledge of sewer systems, even a regular household sewer system, sometimes you have to be at least 1,500 feet from a well. It seems to me like the system is much larger, and with that being community water and school water, and also landowners around that have springs that work more often surface water instead of deep water. How big of an impact zone will there be, and who would be responsible if something does happen?
That's a great question. I'll punt most of it to Amy, but then I might also chime in on some of the school board concerns that Amy might not totally be.
So the drip fields, as we have them conceptually planned out right now, are outside of the isolation protection zone for the schools well. They're also outside of the protection zone for very small water system that serves the few properties that are along Flatiron Road. The springs that were formerly serving those homes have been decommissioned for a long time, way back when the school was built. The wells there are deep bedrock wells. Means that the risk, even if wastewater were to go down that 40, there's like 40 or 50 feet of sand between the ground surface where the wastewater is going to go and a really, really compact till horizon, which we found with the soil borings that we were doing up there a couple of years ago now. Stiff enough that it got stuck in the rod for the drill rig, and the guy had to take it home and bang it out. So there's a lot of protection inherent between lots of treatment and a really dense layer of material above the bedrock, which is where the drinking water is coming from the school and for those private homes that are right nearby.
Okay, but not all those springs some of those springs are still in use. My home,
Okay.
been from one of them.
Okay, I'd like to talk with you more offline so that we have a good idea of where your spring is and what we need to do. Did you have more questions about that?
I think it's kind of been asked already. Once the grant money is all gone and the maintenance and the replacement of the system down the road, what's it actually gonna cost the taxpayers of Wolcott? It's only gonna serve 20 to 30 residences so far. And we know the grant money is, I would assume, a one-time deal. And a lot of these projects get put through and the town folk all vote it through because, oh, well, okay, it's a grant, it's not gonna cost us anything. And then 5 years down the road, all the money dries up. And now we're got 20, 30 septic tanks we have to check yearly, pump maybe yearly. All the buildings, I'm sure somebody has to monitor the system. I don't know if somebody needs to be staffed 24/7 to any failures or anything or nothing like that. But what's the idea of a number, what it's gonna cost the taxpayers at the end?
So we're,
I'm looking at that because there's a slide that we haven't gotten
The
to yet.
next slide.
That and also,
That answers a lot of that, or at least starts to get
okay.
at that.
well, it doesn't really this
doesn't
doesn't,
get at the
it
maintenance
doesn't get into the long-term operating of the system. The wastewater committee and the team are kind of working on different scenarios of what the users will pay and how those costs will be covered. And at future meetings, we'll be able to present sort of what that looks like.
You must have kind of a ballpark figure of what a system gets costs a year to keep.
that and the other thing is, some of these buildings that are on there. It's gonna go right past the highway garage, the fire department, the town building. Over there by the schoolhouse, the library, then you go across the bridge, it'll get you your. Town hall that the town rents and gets the full benefit of. Over by the ballet. Then there's the post office. So actually, there's a few town buildings that. For public use, that if you wanna have public meetings. There's already existing sewer systems. That the town's gonna have to eventually deal with, that work. But eventually the town will have to deal with those. So this will take care of some of that stuff.
But y'all,
Not to mention also eventually, it's in the town plan anyways, for the flood eventually. The fire department and the highway department are eventually, the ultimate goal is to not have them in the floodplain. That's right in the town plan.
What
But
I'm getting at is if it's $300,000 a year to maintain and service and plan and put money aside for replacement down the road, because we know nothing lasts forever. You can't, if you got 30 people on it, 30 places, you can't charge them $10,000 a month for sewer. It will come on the taxpayers.
Peter,
JB,
yeah, I think it would be good to make sure that that there are responsible numbers discussed.
Yeah,
You are correct that the grant funds listed on here go to the capital cost of the system and the first year warranty period. Those are for the construction of the system and making sure that for its first year of operation, it's up and functioning. And after that, there will be ongoing costs. Looking at the town's budget, your library is about 38,000 a year. Currently, your highway department is over 200,000. Operating a small community wastewater system, we know from the experience in Warren Village, in Waitsfield, in a couple of the other villages where Amy and Peter and I have worked. It's slightly bigger than a bread box, smaller than a Volkswagen. You don't need to hire someone, but you will have a contract operator. The preliminary engineering report that Stone Environmental prepared, we're looking at operation and maintenance. We're budgeting conservatively somewhere around $40,000 to $50,000 a year. That's slightly north of your town library budget. It's not the highway budget. So thinking of it in the realm of, yeah, it's taking on a new thing. Then we have to figure out what's the most equitable and economically beneficial way to structure what people who are connected to that system are going to pay. And to the point that was just made, it's an ongoing monthly charge that replaces what you could be exposed to spending to try to deal with septic. So putting it in terms of, well, what would the town spend if we had to go redo these septics on the individuals? Or what would a homeowner have to spend to put in a mound system? Is a way to sort of put those comparisons into perspective. But what we see in village after village is it's somewhere in the territory of like a library budget. It is nowhere near the cost of what town highways are spending. And we're going to be working starting next week with the committee to really figure out what are the equitable ways and what are exactly the taxpayer impacts. You will have that information before you vote.
Is that helpful?
What's the estimated cost the town will have to make up that's not covered by the grants? Just to do the project?
or do you want to maybe jump into this slide then?
Yeah.
Or Seth, whoever was going to do that?
I'll just briefly outline the grant funding we have lined up. Already the town's been awarded 2.56 million in state ARPA funding, as Linda mentioned, and there's additional funding through that pool as well. In January, the town was awarded 640,000 in BCCD CRP grant funding. They've just been awarded clean water SRF funding of $125,000. And the town obligated $125,000 of local ARPA to meet the match requirement for the Northern Borders grant listed at the bottom. And that Northern Borders grant would close the gap in funding that remains for the capital costs.
The capital costs would include the hookup to each individual parcel as well.
So the houses in the village would have zero cost for construction?
For construction.
Okay.
Other than, we have to clarify, we're short of the total cost. And we have roughly 3.3 million in potential costs of a little bit more than 4. But we've applied for more grants, but we won't know if the grants are awarded until after the vote. So we have to bond. So we have to ask for the money, even though we might get it later. So if we get all of the grants, the additional grants that we're waiting to hear back from, we would have enough to potentially build out the whole system, but we have to borrow money in the short term in June in order to,
Well-
until we find out.
So what's the
But Jim-
estimated bond amount?
Jim, I want to make a clarification there, though. You don't borrow the money. You're not borrowing money when you vote. What you're doing when you're voting is you authorize the select board to incur the debt contingent on and limited to a certain maximum amount. And your language can be contingent on receiving at least X amount of dollars. But the vote doesn't incur the debt. And I think that's really important for everybody to understand that the debt is only incurred if, when, and as you actually build the system. So you're not obligating that money by voting. You're basically authorizing the select board to borrow up to a certain amount if they need to. Because if you get enough grants to cover the capital costs, they may not have to borrow anything. That's our ideal, and that's what we're working towards. Now, that doesn't take away the ongoing operation and maintenance. That is still a cost that you're incurring, but just bear in mind that the bond vote doesn't incur the debt.
Thanks for clarifying, Jamie. So just think of it, there's two pots of funding. There's the cost to build, which includes the survey, design, permitting, and construction. And then there's the operation and maintenance, which is ongoing annual amount allocation, which will be billed monthly for, we have commercial businesses, we have town parcels that Alan just mentioned, and we have individual residential homes that's part we're having discussions on how we structure those fees in the future. So those are going to be ongoing. But we're hoping that we're going to get most or all of that capital costs covered.
Is the intent or hope to have the users of the system be funding that yearly maintenance cost versus going out to the town?
We're having those discussions now, starting next week. We're trying to make it as affordable as possible for people that are living in the village as the highest priority.
So if you were to do the bond vote now, Jim, what's the worst case scenario? I mean, what would you be asking for up to?
But the numbers that Peter's, we're still working on those numbers, but a little bit north of 700,000.
A little bit north of 700,000. And
That's if we don't get those other grants that we.
and how long would you borrow that 700,000 for normally?
This would be through the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund. And so it's a very low interest, but the terms can be 2%. And the 2% interest
For how many years?
can be up to 30.
30.
Up to 30,
years.
but usually 30.
So if you take 700,000, 30 years, 25 years, even at 2%, you're probably talking what, 50 to 60,000?
No, it's 31
In
to
interest.
55.
31, good.
31 to
30
55.
31 to 55.
Yep. That's your
And-
worst case
Right.
borrowing situation.
Thank you. And right now, and yeah, thank you, son. And right now, Tom, you can correct me, but 1 cent on the tax rate raises about what, $17,000?
16, about
16?
yeah.
Okay, and by the time we get reassessed, the town-wide reassessment, that'll probably be $30,000. Okay? So we're basically talking worst case scenario, 1 cent on the tax rate. If you had to borrow, and you may not even have to borrow.
Right.
Okay, and the second point is, okay, let's say you don't have to borrow and it's given to us. Operation, $30,000 to $40,000 a year, 1 cent on the tax rate. 1 cent on the tax rate, and we're gonna play Russian roulette with whether Wolcott does this or not. Because if we don't, folks, I don't know. I don't know what to say to you. Because if this village is gonna survive and be anything, this has to happen. It should have happened years ago.
Thank you.
It should have happened years ago. But the people then didn't have the foresight and the willingness to spend the money. And now it's practically being given to us. And in fact, it sounds like it's being given to us. And I just hope that there is a way to get the vast majority of people that aren't here, that won't listen, that won't read, that may come out and vote for reasons other than logic. Understand where we are and where we need to go. I also was a preacher at one time.
Walter?
Okay, it's a basic fairness issue here. See, I live up on the hill in Dayton, my own septic system. So that's one argument. The other one is, the people down in the village don't get squat out of that grader that they pay for. Or that town crew that they pay overtime for when I want my road plowed. It's a very basic fairness issue.
Right, and if my culvert goes out by my house, I expect the town to pay for it. And that includes everybody that's living in the village. So these people that say, well, I don't live in the village, why should I pay for this? I don't understand. Because we're all one family. And we need to operate that way.
And I've been arguing that there's tremendous economic benefit from just the tourism, the rail trail, you name it. There's economic benefit to this. It's not just 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Real?
There's also the common good. There are certain things that just assist with the common good, like the library, like I don't have children, thankfully. And thankfully for all in family. But I pay taxes for school. Why is that? Who doesn't want to live around educated people? You need educated people, you need kids who can satisfy their curiosity and live fulfilling lives. So I'm happy to pay for a school system. There are community things, this wastewater thing, for one thing, what about the river? This town would not be here if it were not for the river. And when we hear that, we heard from some folks that there was raw sewage going into the river. I mean, that doesn't fly anymore. You just can't do that anymore. It also limits the extent to which people can use the river recreationally, which would be an incredible, if we had kayak put-ins and events or something like that, that also increases the recreational good for the people around here or the people who come through. I live on Social Security. I'm not living large, but I don't mind my taxes going to things that are going to stand for what we want in the village. And we need more rateables, we need more housing in the village, we need clean water. To me, it's just such a no-brainer, and it's not just because I live with Bruce.
Roger, did you?
Well, I'm kind of a terminal optimist over here. I think the big investment too is that we want some businesses to go. And with the influx of new businesses, a restaurant or a bar where I can go out on a date night and not drive 15 miles to come home afterwards, or to bring my mom, when she comes to visit, or drive from New York, can't walk on hills in my property very easily, to enjoy the river, the clean, non-55 river, please. I'm relatively, but I think the big thing coming back to the numbers is if we get viable businesses in here that are benefiting proportionally from the system, some of those costs are going to be defrayed by the businesses themselves, and that'll lessen the impact. At least that's my hope when we're doing the numbers, is that will ultimately lessen the impact on homeowners. And encourage people to support local businesses too. This is kind of feeding the pot, it's keeping the town strong. You know, and in terms of resiliency and stuff, it's like, it's good to have supply centers that are close to where you live and change. You know, I think about my house up in Eastville, there was a flood. And we were an island for, better part of 24 hours, because there's no way off the hill, at least not in the car, but, we're pretty old. I mean, it's like, seeing a vibrant village that's thriving and bringing, new experiences and new memories to people. And I think it's great and beautiful to hear the memories of the past, but honestly, I want to create new memories with my own family here. And, maybe even start my own business in the village and not have to drive 30 minutes to open up a simple store, That's my thoughts on it.
That and, how many people have you been and gone through Marshfield and Cabot? How many of you people know there actually have water and wastewater there? Marshfield put theirs in the 80s. Cabot in 2000 to keep their village, keep their businesses, put one in. And they have a village, they still have a school because they have the wastewater in there. Wolcott, you could have that.
It's been in my mind for some time. And I figured this, between the state and the river, there wasn't gonna be any Wolcott village. Period. And I think that's coming true every day.
And any other thoughts, comments, questions? Sure.
If the town forest abuts the school property, why wouldn't you put the leach field in the town forest? Cut out an acre and a half swath. Put it there, and that way it gets sometimes. Is that much different?
Amy has your answer.
I can help with that one. The town forest was one of the areas that couple years ago, the potential town forest was one of the properties that we walked over, that Peter walked over actually, before all of the agreements were being developed, just to get an idea of, is there any area that could work? And our findings were not really. There would be there was one area that could maybe a little bit, but it's a lot of tree clearing and impact to habitat. And it didn't seem like it was worth it to continue to pursue that, especially since there was the school field that had really good really and a little closer to the village.
I just want to add, having walked that site with Peter, we really, 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 really wanted the town forest to be great for wastewater dispersal, because we just, having a conversation with a school raises a lot of issues. And the more we walked, the more our hearts sank. And the physical damage that would have had to be done to the town forest to get at that one section Amy's talking about made it really a non-starter. And there's a lot of water and a lot of slope.
Slope is sort of the biggest issue on most of the property. We have sort of constraints with our regulations on how steep those systems can be put. So,
Which part of the town forest property were you looking at?
so we looked down below, which is too wet. And then we also did a pretty good tour around in terms of looking for other spots, and that's where
Down below means between the school and Rhoda Vidal's house? To the south of the school, essentially?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
down off of School Street, I think you mean, right? Right down on School Street.
School Street, east of School Street where the town forest is, but and south of the school, the next driveway on School Street is Rhoda Vidal's house. And it's her land, their land that is becoming the town forest.
Right, yeah.
So if it's that low spot in between the school and the next house, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's kind of borderline wetlands down through, the slopes are better. And then from what we sort of explored around, there just weren't any contiguous flatter areas that could work.
Yeah, okay. And I can also say from, me walking around on the property, a fair amount. Not as much as, say Scott Douglas used to do and other people who have hunted on it, but I've spent some time walking around on the property. The soil, so the school, it sits on top of a big pile of sand. The rest of the soils around in the town forest are typical of what I find in so many other places where, it rains a little bit and the whole thing is soggy. It's not draining very well. It's just the regular, glacial till that's left from, is mostly other places. So if you go looking up, the part of the town forest up behind the town offices and the flip side of the river, the soil's real thin, it's rocky, there's nothing to work with. And like I said, the school's sitting on top of just a big pile of sand.
Well, the school originally acquired that property from the town of Wolcott, and it was the town of Wolcott's gravel pit. That's how it started.
But isn't there an old house site just east of
Mhm.
the street, whatever, the road that goes up to the school? Just past it, up on the hill, there's an old driveway up there,
Yeah.
that's a big flat area up there, I can't imagine the
Right.
soils are that much different up there than.
What's your concern
You
about having it at school?
When the leach field fails, and then the kids won't be able to use those ball fields, in 15, 20 years.
Well, doesn't it, I
Well,
mean, it seems to
yeah,
me from
replace.
what I've heard that hasn't been the experience with people who have had these systems.
It will eventually, I mean, like the gentleman up front said here, everything has life expectancy.
One thing that
Everybody's,
I may just chime in on the failure part of it. Because there are the 5 or 6 zones, it's very easy to isolate problem areas, fix those and sort of rotate around and offer some flexibility in that in terms of making it work. And then I also say the indirect discharge rules are very conservative in terms of sort of oversizing it so that in theory, this system should never fail. And that's part of the idea behind rotating each of the zones. And then also that on top of the proper maintenance. The goal for this really is no failures, but if you did have a portion of the leach field that had problems, you could isolate it and take it offline.
The system has a 30 to 40-year lifespan.
I will say I manage, or I shouldn't say manage, but I inspect annually a lot of these indirect discharge systems. Many of them in the 10 to 20,000 gallon per day range. A lot of them preceded the indirect discharge rules, but are sort of regulated under them now. So they're not really up to current standards. And we rarely see problems on these well-managed systems. Even the ones that are really substandard, because they're managed and because the design flows are very conservative, really do just continue to operate fine. And, I've been telling people for years, these, standard septic system only lasts 20 to 30 years, but the reality is if they're designed properly, it's really much longer. And in the case of the indirect discharge systems, I truly think the goal is that it's a perpetual thing that doesn't fail.
I will just add to what Peter said, that the indirect discharge rules were first enacted in 1986. These systems that have been permitted under the rules before they were rules are almost 40 years old.
Right.
With very few failures.
We're kind of getting along in the evening. I just wanted the take home message. We have a big vote on June 11th. It's actually going to be 2 questions on the vote. The question of the bond, and will the town be allowed to borrow the money to build this if we need it? And the second question is going to be, can we site the system up at the school's athletic fields? And we need a yes vote on both. We encourage folks to talk to your friends and neighbors in town. We're gonna have another informational meeting before the vote. And we'll have some more definitive answers on the question of the operation and maintenance costs and the capital costs. And also asking folks in the room, we've been doing front porch forum posts. We have a bunch of flyers and handouts over here by the door. And what's the best way to reach people that are not in the room or to give you folks here some more information that you might want? Any suggestions, thoughts?
So what sort of participation do we need on that June 9th vote in order for it to be valid?
We need more yeses than those.
Is there a certain percentage of the town that has to vote? Just
No.
No.
June 11th,
June 11th.
not the 9th.
June 11th, yeah.
June 11th, yes.
And just remember, the school board did approve this to have it on the school grounds. I mean, I think they can talk about it, but I mean, I hear it go back and forth. The school board has agreed to this. And as, I'm not sure if the memorandum of understanding is already signed, but just so you know, this is not something like we're throwing at it. The school board, it has gone through the school board about this.
Correct, we essentially authorized the engineering company to continue the testing on the site to determine, to, really go to the next level of analysis to determine the viability of the site, its capacity, all the stuff that I couldn't tell you. But the idea is that, we're cautious because we put the kids first. We want to make sure that they're safe, but at the same time, healthy town needs to help the kids too. So, but we're not, there's no one on the school board in our discussion that's, putting septic system before the safety of the kids.
Thank you.
They gave us several
Good.
presentations, that were very good and, put a lot of our concern at ease in the moment. We're waiting to see what the additional testing does, but basically if the tests support the viability of the site, then the school board have authorized to move forward and allow the town to vote on it. The school board can't decide for the town.
Any other final thoughts, questions, comments?
Just thank you all for what you've done and hope we
yes.
get over this.
So there's brownies and cookies in the back, some drinks, and there's a little bit of pizza left, and folks want to ask us questions, please come on up. And there's a flyer.
Those newspapers.
Three kids,
really
ten.
wonderful.
Yeah.